Welcome back. The Old West wasn't just gunfights and gold rushes. Its red light districts hid secrets so bizarre, historians still can't believe they're real. We're uncovering 20 wild facts that'll completely change how you see the frontier. Smash that like button and let's dive in. Fact number 10 will leave you speechless.
Before we list the facts, it's important to build a picture of many of the women in this field, often referred to at the time as soiled doves. Many of them came from women who had no other choice to support themselves. For example, their husbands passed away, often at a young age. This shows by the average age of a prostitute, which was around 23. However, the women could be looking for financial independence. In these times, women had few career paths, and some would turn to working at a brothel in order to afford their true passions and ventures. There are even reports of women working at brothels to afford land and farms. Another type were teenage girls, often as young as 15, whose families had abandoned them or who ran away from home. Because of these circumstances, the women would often be taken advantage of, though some could win it big, as revealed in some of these facts. Keep in mind that all their stories are different, with each of them contributing to the tales we'll tell in this video. When you picture a brothel in the Old West, do you imagine a fancy building? Think again. In most boomtowns, these places were just tents or shacks thrown up next to the saloon. Take Deadwood in 1876. Madams ran their houses of pleasure out of canvas tents and rough huts right on Main Street. Customers would duck behind a curtain for a few minutes, pay with whatever they had, usually gold dust, and head back out. And as one may expect, this exchange could spell disaster oftentimes. No doctors, no running water, and definitely no health inspections. So disease spread fast. One may go into the brothel for fun, then later end up in the infirmary, or worse. But sheriffs usually looked the other way, since brothel fees and taxes kept the town running. On payday, miners would settle up with gold nuggets or dust, and the madams kept careful track in their ledgers right next to the whiskey sales. This photo, taken in Morocco in the 1920s, gives you an idea of what a brothel looked like at this time. It was minimal, but it did the job. This fact shows that the world's oldest profession earns its name. Even in a town with no comfortable homes, bathing, or even privacy, people would pay to partake in deeds that some may find sinful. Our next fact will discuss how these brothels not only catered to the desires of men, but even helped put a town on the map. Virginia City, Nevada, in the 1880s was wild thanks to the Comstock Silver Strike. Prostitution was so common that the city actually paid its bills with brothel and saloon fees. On Sunday, the city leaders would preach about morals, but come Monday, they'd be counting up the cash from gambling and brothel licenses. One of the most famous madams was Madame Moustache, Eleanor Dumont. She got her name due to her having a faint line of hair on her upper lip. Her life was unique, going from a gambler to running several brothels to becoming the frontier's standard of a millionaire. And the ultimate punchline: the so-called sin money helped build this town, paying for street lamps, patrols, and much more. Even the newspapers joked that prostitutes mined silver dollars from the men during the rush. Madame Moustache showed that even the biggest gamblers make a safe bet. Until the law came down on prostitution, the act sold, and sold very well. In 1881, the Birdcage Theater in Tombstone, Arizona, opened as a saloon and show house. Few knew that behind the main floor, a secret passage led upstairs to 14 curtained cribs, or tiny rooms where prostitutes worked day and night. Patrons could gamble and drink on the ground floor, then slip upstairs for private company. The Birdcage was notorious for this double life. Prostitution became an integral part of the business, with 14 curtained booths serving as cribs for the madame's women. Lawmen snuck in, too, and shootouts were so common that bullet holes are still seen on the walls. As one guide notes, the Birdcage's reputation as the wildest, wickedest night spot owes much to this upstairs/downstairs split. Tombstone's leaders allowed it because the money kept flowing, cementing the town's Wild West legend for decades. While many aspects of the Wild West have been exaggerated, Tombstone showed that every legend has some ring of truth to it, especially when that truth involved lining pockets. The next fact will go into how rich some of these women became when they took up the profession, highlighting the affluence that they accrued through choosing this profession. Most people back then thought prostitutes were poor, but Denver in the 1870s had a madam who proved them wrong. Maddie Silks paid $13,000, which is over $361,000 today, to buy a big brothel on Market Street. She ran it like a business with about 20 women, set prices, usually $1 per turn, and strict rules. Maddie kept careful ledgers and counted the cash every night. She invested her profits in land and other businesses, eventually owning a ranch and fancy real estate. She even bragged about paying off the police. She once said she paid $50 a day for police to look the other way while making $38,000 in just 90 days. She loved to show off her jewelry and silk dresses, which drove the local moral crusaders crazy. They refused to print her photo, saying it was indecent, even though she was one of the richest people in Denver. When she died, few people attended her funeral, and yet her legacy still lives on to this day. She is an early example of a person being famous for being in a profession seen as indecent, and may have paved the way for many of the models we see today. Dodge City, Kansas, in the late 1870s had about 700 people and around 50 prostitutes. In these cattle towns, men outnumbered women by a lot, and disease spread fast. There were no antibiotics, so things like gonorrhea or syphilis could go untreated for years. Some court records even mention cowboys losing their memory or going insane because of untreated syphilis. Nothing, from quarantining to multiple trips to the doctor, seemed to work. As writer Marcia Allen put it, most prostitutes died young because of disease and abuse. The city doctor and sheriff would sometimes raid brothels to isolate the sick, but they kept it quiet. Meanwhile, most folks just looked the other way. The real story only shows up in old reports and cemetery records, highlighting the case of death in certain cases. Their story is a testament to how dangerous this line of work was, especially when treatments for these diseases were non-existent or primitive. One would come to work, not knowing if the next client would spell their doom. Here's something you might not expect. Some of the first supporters of women's right to vote were actually frontier madams. In the Wyoming Territory around 1869, lawmakers were debating whether to allow women to vote, hoping it would help settle family disputes. Some of the richest and most powerful women in towns like Cheyenne and Laramie were brothel owners. These madams wanted legal protection and a fair business climate, so they discreetly lobbied politicians and used their money and connections to help pass the law. In December 1869, Wyoming became the first U.S. territory to give women the vote through the bill, an act to grant to the women of Wyoming Territory the right of suffrage and to hold office. This fact reveals that often the fight for rights can inherently come from folks who are often on the wrong side of the law or who are facing possible regulations. Often, the fight for one's rights can make for strange bedfellows, and in Wyoming, it really brought people together. Our next fact will go into the darkness behind some of these brothels. While some women were treated right, many were not, with some living in horrid conditions. San Francisco's Barbary Coast in the 1860s was a rough place, and for Chinese women, it was even worse. Traffickers forced them into prostitution, locking them in tiny crib houses. These homes were 8 by 12 feet, barely enough for a mattress and a dim lamp. The doors stayed locked, and most were trapped by debt, often manufactured by their owners through fees for clothing or passage. Missionaries and activists later found diary entries and court cases about these chained captives, but the newspapers and city officials mostly ignored them, and until recently, it was dismissed as merely a rumor. Slavery, even after it was near abolishment, can still exist in the seedy underground of the United States. And if there are enough people selling the lie, people will ignore the issues or dismiss them as mere rumors. Current political events can, fittingly, echo the human rights injustices in the past. Not every frontier woman stayed in the background. Mary Big Nose Kate, Catherine Harney, Doc Holliday's girlfriend, was a well-known bordello owner in Tombstone around 1880. The story goes that when Doc was about to be hanged for a shooting, Kate started a fire near the jail, screamed for help, and drew the guards outside. In the confusion, Doc slipped his chains and walked free. Locals loved the story, but the newspapers and church didn't want to talk about it. A photo of Kate in a revealing dress with Doc popped up for a bit, then disappeared. It seems like nobody wanted a prostitute to be a frontier hero. Makes you wonder, who really wrote the history of the Wild West, the sheriff or the madam? Doc Holliday was a fascinating figure, and no stranger to this channel when it comes to retelling some of the craziest tales in the Old West. But sometimes, the people around him can be just as fascinating, if not more so than the man taking the credit. When the railroad crews pushed west in the 1860s, so did brothels. The construction camps known as Hell on Wheels were essentially movable towns, saloons, dance halls, gambling tables, and brothels set up in tents, wagons, or even old train cars. When the track advanced, those flimsy structures were quickly taken down and packed up. One historian notes the camps changed every 30 or 40 days, sometimes just a few canvas tents or board shanties pulled forward. Women followed on horseback or wagon, arranging prices and protection fees with local lawmen at each new site. The railroad officially denied any involvement, but employees knew perfectly well that vice kept the tired engineers and laborers content. Even rumors of a brothel in a boxcar were suppressed. No one wanted headlines while the rails were being laid. Again, this face shows why prostitution is known as the world's oldest profession. Even when expanding into an unknown territory, one has certain needs that need to be met. And the people who travel will do anything to ensure that the needs come with them, even going so far as to hide the trail of evidence. By the 1880s, booming railheads like Dodge City were luring in young women with false promises. Recruiters told farm or orphan girls they'd have steady work as cooks or maids in civilized towns. Many of the girls would leave their families, promising to be out there for only a little bit, sending their earnings back when they could. Instead, the girls found themselves sold into a back room of a saloon or a living house of ill fame. Brothel owners told them they owed room, board, even the cost of their dresses, trapping them in perpetual debt. These women had no family to turn to once they left, and with no doctors. Disease, syphilis, tuberculosis, fevers ran rampant. In a few years, a girl was either dead or far down the next boomtown track under a new name. Historian Marcia Allen grimly notes that, given the high rates of sexual disease and physical abuse, most prostitutes died young. Local papers preached morality publicly, but privately, the sheriff counted on brothel taxes. If they did have families, they rarely asked questions. After all, those women left to find jobs. They would have no reason to come back. Once again, we can look at current events and make parallels between the sufferings of young women, and sometimes girls, to the horrors faced today. It begs the question, how civilized are we really? In the 1860s, Helena, Montana had a gold rush, and a saloon dancer named Josephine Airy, better known as Chicago Joe. She opened a bordello for wealthy miners and used her profits to buy property throughout town. When fires hit Helena in 1874, Joe bought up the burned lots and built new businesses. Within 10 years, she was a major landlord, shaking hands with politicians at ribbon cuttings. By 1890, 8 prostitutes, including Joe, owned millions in property. Only the railroads paid more taxes than these red-light business owners. The press and church didn't like it, so photos of Joe signing checks or donating to city projects quietly vanished. Her secret empire acted as a reminder that respectable frontier towns were often built on the backs of sex workers, and further reminds us that many of these women weren't poor, they were businesswomen. By the 1860s, San Francisco's Barbary Coast was packed with vice. Think brothels, saloons, and opium dens all crowded together. Many prostitutes and waitresses used drugs themselves, sometimes putting opium or cocaine in their own water or even in a customer's drink just to numb the pain of their work. City Hall didn't care as long as the money kept coming in. When reformers finally raided the area, the blame always landed on the Chinese. The press pointed fingers at Chinamen for opium and slave rings, while vice squads arrested low-level workers and street prostitutes. The rich madams who owned the brothels usually got away with it. As one source put it, enormous corruption among police and city officials helped the traffickers. In the end, the bosses counted their profits upstairs while the little guys took the fall. And once again, one can parallel this fact with the bigotry that happens today. People are quick to blame the less fortunate for crime and corruption. In reality, it's often the so-called respectable people in the suits who are the real culprits. Louisiana's famous plaçage system meant some city officials pretended not to see certain affairs, but only within strict boundaries. In Louisiana's famous plaçage system, city officials often looked the other way, at least if you followed the rules. In the 1870s, French Quarter, quadroon balls, let wealthy white men meet free women of color in fancy but strictly segregated dance halls. White men came in one door, Creole women in another, and signs on the wall made it clear, whites only. If anyone broke the rules, it was a scandal. Historian Monique Galori said a high-status quadroon mistress could destabilize white marriages just by being there. Newspapers would stir up a moral panic, and police would raid or shut down the event, usually arresting only the black or mixed-race guests. The rich clients slipped away or bribed the cops, leaving the servants or lower-class folks to take the blame. The Mann Act, also known as White Slave Traffic Act, made it a crime to move women or girls for the purpose of prostitution across state lines. Cities from 1910 to 1913 systematically reversed decades of tolerated vice. City after city closed its brothels, and federal agents backed local raids. Thousands of sex workers were suddenly out of business overnight. Many tried to find legitimate jobs at the moment, but most simply went underground. Many cheered this, including feminists who believed all the women were being exploited, like Harriet Burton Laidlaw. The only trace of the purge was the dry official reports kept by the FBI and the Justice Department, files now gathering dust in the archives. Meanwhile, newspapers cheered the moral victory but seldom mentioned the wrecked lives behind it. In mining towns like Leadville, Colorado, around 1880, brothel madams had their own way of keeping women trapped, debt. A woman might charge $1 per call, but the madam took half right away for rent or tips, then charged her the rest. On paper, a woman could make $100 a week, but almost every cent went to rent, dresses, meals, medicine, whiskey, and even bribes to the doctor. By the end of the week, the ledger usually showed her in the red. One person said, "The bill almost always won." The records from these bordellos were so damning that they were often locked away and never published. Even today, you can find hints in old archives about censored brothel ledgers, proof that madams made sure they owned both the money and the women. Again, this reminds us of life today. While we have improved in many ways, many of us are still marred by debt and find paying it off an uphill battle. To this day, the bill is still always winning. In the 1890s, San Antonio, Texas, had a nightlife district that doubled as a hideout for outlaws. Madam Fanny Porter ran one of the city's most famous brothels, and by the late 1890s, it was a favorite spot for Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch. Porter's place was fancy. Think carpeted parlors, crystal glasses, and chilled champagne, and she had the support of city officials and local lawmen. Prisoners could meet lawyers or outlaw friends in private booths, and secret messages were passed over drinks. Porter was even known to chase a sheriff away with a broom if he tried to arrest a customer. Pinkerton agents later said her house was a rest stop, hideout, and headquarters for bandits. Since so many important people visited, the police destroyed any logbooks or address books with VIP names. This fact shows that often outlaws would hide in plain sight. While a brothel may have seemed like an obvious place for an outlaw to hide, they were in good company and would give them plenty of shelter while the heat died down. For example, Pendleton's Main Street had a secret, an underground network of tunnels built by Chinese workers. By the 1880s, these tunnels connected the basements of saloons, hotels, and brothels. The glass block sidewalks above even let in a little light. Local stories say that when deputies raided the red light district, cowboys and merchants would vanish through a basement hatch and pop up blocks away, safe and sound. Old accounts confirm that bordello girls and other working professionals used the tunnels to avoid trouble. For years, Pendleton kept these tunnels a secret. If a newspaper ever showed a hidden entrance, the photo was quickly lost or destroyed. This fact shows just how dangerous and seedy brothels can be. Imagine any place of business today needing an escape tunnel. Rarely does such a thing happen. In the past, however, these tunnels were sometimes the one thing keeping them from getting arrested. Even army forts on the frontier had a red light economy. Fort Laramie, Wyoming, around 1860, was a trading hub where Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho brought buffalo robes tanned by the women to swap for hardware, liquor, and goods. But in many cases, Native women exchanged sexual favors alongside the hides. Fort commanders were well aware of this side deal, but tolerated it, since it kept peace and trade flowing with the tribes. For years, this grisly detail was left out of published histories, surfacing only when historians later uncovered private correspondence. The lesson: some frontier trade involved just as many bodies as buffalo. It also reminds us that not every trade with the indigenous tribes was necessarily something considered pure. Just as Wyoming's women helped win women's rights, the world's oldest profession helped win them. In the 1890s, Idaho's silver towns had a busy sporting class right alongside the miners and merchants. When the 1896 suffrage amendment came up for a vote, brothel owners supported it. They saw voting rights as a way to protect their own businesses. Idaho gave women the vote in 1896, long before the 19th Amendment. However, mention of this involvement was ignored. Local officials even censored photos of brothel women at suffrage rallies, saying it was too immoral. Once again, it shows that so-called vice careers help pave the way for some rights we take for granted today. And these are 20 eye-opening facts about the Old West brothels of yesteryear. The world of these brothels contained many secrets, some of which still have yet to be uncovered. Chances are, we can make a second video of this if this does well enough. What are some of your most mind-blowing secrets you learned today? Was there any we missed? Let us know in the comments.